What up?
What is up?
Podcast. What's happening, Max?
What's going on, Sean? How you doing today, my brother?
I'm good. I'm good, man. I'm good. Hey, we're on the eve of SD22. A lot of excitement, a lot of things in the air, a lot of things people want to talk about with SD22. Hey, but before we get into that, we're just going to ask you guys to like and subscribe our podcast. If you can, just go down, mash that like button, and subscribe to our podcast. We love to bring you content concerning Marvel, the MCU, all the comic book world, and sometimes even that DCEU, which we reluctantly talk about. But for tonight's podcast, me and Max is just going to have a little side chat about that Phase 4 stuff, man, because, you know, with Comic-Con, there's just so much information out there, the speculation. We don't know what's real. We don't know what's not. We had a show about a week ago or so where we talked about our big projections of what we think is or isn't. But I think tonight we just want to talk to you guys more about Phase 4 and how it's tying into what really we like to see or want to see moving forward. There's a lot of folks that don't really understand Phase 4, and there's some folks that's lost. So we just want to have a conversation to wrap some bows on Phase 4 and bring you some information that might make sense as we move forward in the MCU. So I'm going to kick it to Max. And Max, you just tell me a little bit about what you want to see and give me some highlights from your Phase 4.
Well, you know, with the end of Phase 3, we ended with Endgame, right? And that was maybe the perfect bow to tie on that gift that, you know, the first three phases of the Infinity Saga were, right?
Yeah.
So is it just natural that maybe a little regression was coming? Maybe it's like, you know, a sports metaphor would be if you average 35, 10, and 10, and then one year you average 38 and 8. It's still good, but yeah, it is a slight regression, so it doesn't hold up as well. Is that maybe part of the problem plaguing Phase 4? Because Phase 4 to me, it's been good. It hasn't been great. So is that just maybe what's happened so far in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, Max, I think it's got a lot to do with the sports analogy like you brought up. You know, I mean, for those of us that's old enough, we remember the Chicago Bulls in the 90s, right? And we remember how the Bulls just dominated and everybody was on the bandwagon for the Bulls. I mean, there was a couple of teams that didn't really like him, a couple of people that didn't really like him, but everybody wanted to see Jordan do his thing. And I think we're like that. We were like that with phases 1, 2, and 3. You know, the big lead up or the big crush up was Thanos. You know, the villain's going to show up. The villain won in Infinity War, and then he was defeated in Endgame. So going into Phase 4, Kevin Feige and the crew over at the MCU was like, man, we can't repeat the same old story, man. We're not going to paint ourselves in the corner. So let's start up with new and broaden the horizons of the story. And I think that's what some of the people don't understand. That even if you look around me with my backdrop right now, there's comic books galore. Some of the characters that you had seen on the big screen in some of these teams had their own comic book runs 2 and 3 and 4 times. So now I think that they're expanding the universe to bring us more content. And I think that might make a little sense. Max, what do you think about, you know, that ideology, the Phase 4 is broadening horizons?
It is, but, you know, you talked about your comic books behind you, and you can answer this better than I can. Were there set rules in those comics? Was the continuity of the Marvel Universe rules super strict in those comics?
I'm gonna say this. It depended on the era. Sort of like in, you know, basketball. You know, the 60s and 70s had a set of rules. The 80s and 90s had a set of rules. The 2000s or early 2000s had a set of rules. And now we play by a different set of rules. It's still all basketball, but the rules switched to adapt to the culture and make it better. So there was multiverse. There was always that stuff that existed from somewhere around the late 70s and early 80s. But it expanded more and more and more because they realized that they had to bring more content and more characters in to make the stories richer. So if that analogy gives you a sense or a point about what they're doing in Phase Four.
No, it makes total sense, and this is something we have to really consider with the MCU. And when Marvel Comics is writing it, right, in those days, they didn't have to worry about the appearance of certain characters. For instance, Spider-Man. We all know about the difficulty of acquiring him. When we got him in Civil War, it seemed like something that we would never see. And
Mm,
now with Phase 4, we're ushering in the Eternals are coming in. And something that might just have changed stuff in Phase 4 is there's been a lot more intro movies. What I call like an intro movie is Thor 1, Iron Man 1.
mm.
How many intro movies we have in Phase 2? What, Ant-Man? That's it? We were getting 1 to
Yeah,
2 every phase.
Guardians,
And
Guardians of the
Guardians?
Galaxy, and that man.
Yeah,
That's
so we're
it.
not getting, now we're getting Eternals, Shang-Chi, um, Black Widow is basically an intro movie because we learned about her past. I know she'd been in it, but we
Right,
get so many new characters coming in. We got What If, and we didn't have TV shows part of phases before. Like we're
right,
filling the gaps, and I think what happened was maybe a little bit borderline too much. It was like every time you couldn't breathe. And I think something that really helped Marvel movies was the gap between them. How much time, Sean, will we just speculate? Oh my God, this is what it means. This is what it means. This connects to this. And we
right,
really haven't had that gap. We really haven't had,
right.
and I think that's kind of contributed to maybe the lack of love for Phase 4. It's been so concrete, the imagination of it's kind of been taken away, even though What If kind of opened that door.
Right, right. Well, I think the big thing too, and that what some folks are really confused about is the importance of the Disney Plus shows. The Disney Plus shows are beyond relevant. I had a conversation with a couple of family members over the last few days about the importance of Disney Plus and the content that's brought on those shows. Because right now they're lost. They're like, man, I went to go see Doctor Strange and I didn't even understand how that connected to Thor, Ragnarok. And I was like, okay, did you watch Loki? Did you watch WandaVision? Did you watch What If? Did you watch Moon Knight? Did you watch Miss Marvel? And they were like, some of like one or two, they was like, yeah, but we didn't. And I was like explaining to them that you're going to be lost if you don't go back and view that content and watch it because they're still telling the same story. It's just the fact of now you can sit in the comfort of your home and versus watching it at a 2 hour block at a movie theater, you can literally binge watch it. You can sit and wait till the whole series is over, watch 6 episodes, 7 episodes, or 8 episodes on a Friday or Saturday, and catch all the way up with the content that's being brought to you by the MCU. And I don't know if people really like that, Max. What you think? Do you think folks sort of
I
like
think
that,
it's
or
just
where do you
kind
think
of
they're lost?
I think it's a new standard for how to do it, and we've kind of all been established of 10 plus years. Here's the next movie. That's all you need to know. You just need to know the movie. It's kind of, I always tied into one of my favorite video games was Halo, and when they started
Mm,
making like the Halos later on, it was like you need to learn about it. You have to read a book to learn about the game. It's like, well, I just want to watch the game. I just want to play the game and learn about the game. I don't want to read this book. And the
yeah,
shows are kind of like that. The only good difference is these shows are a lot more entertaining than a book, but that's the concept's the same. You need to know the little like garnishes so they help the main course. So that way you're not like, dang, the steak's missing something. Oh, I need the potatoes on the side. That's what Loki was to Doctor Strange. If you watch Doctor Strange in a vacuum without watching Loki, WandaVision, What If, I feel bad to say, but you missed out. You really missed out.
mm,
You missed out on key information, great content, and
mm.
just the whole picture. How can you? It's kind of like, how do you read a book without having all the pages? And that's what the shows do.
Right, right. And Max, you made a great point, and I think people need to really look at it from a historical standpoint. From a history standpoint, if you omit or delete pages of content, you miss the story of the history. And we got to realize that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they are telling their story about their history. So they're tying different stories in as we go because right off the bat, you couldn't understand and know that we're going to lead to 4, 5, 6 super teams, or 15 or 25 different villains, or 9 or 10 different story arcs with different characters, and seeing characters change or transform, sort of like Falcon changed into Captain America. You couldn't
And
do that from the very beginning because people would be lost. Does that make
no,
sense?
yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, you makes perfect sense. And think about what this phase has introduced. I mean, what were they introducing in phase 1 and 2? They were introducing the heroes. These are the teams.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the god. This is Thor. This is his realm. Guardians of the
Mm-hmm.
Galaxy. This is space. We have these guys on Earth. We have guys in New York. We have guys in Wakanda. What
Mm-hmm.
are they trying to introduce in this phase? Celestials, the multiverse, variants, time, the
Mutants.
quantum realm, mutants. Those
Yeah.
are a lot more tricky things to like weave into the fabric of the MCU. It's not just like, oh, here's Iron Man, here's War Machine. That's pretty easy. That's not a big deal.
Mm.
We're trying. If you saw Celestials, that was your first movie, you'd be like, this is so dumb. Why is there this planet, this cosmic planet person? If you don't have Thanos, you never think someone could be that strong.
Mm.
There's like
Great
a
point.
game within a game for Marvel
Right.
movies. It's not just about here's the plot. It's like, oh, this is in Avengers Age of Ultron, they make 3 references to Endgame and chess. And they're just making references and dropping little like points about Thanos and the Infinity Stones. It's a movie within a movie. And that's
Yeah.
difficult to do. And Ethan Hawke said this recently. MCU is great for actors, maybe not so much for directors, because you don't just go into this movie with the blank slate and say, do whatever you want. It's like, here's what we have
Right.
to look for. You can't introduce him. You got to take this away. And it's tough,
Yeah.
but that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely say that, Max, because there's already content out there concerning the players or who they actually are. And that brings up a great cross point to talk about maybe like the anti-hero aspect of phase four. Phase four, it introduced people who are more or less neutral and what we've deemed or said on this show for months, the anti-hero. It depends on your perspective of the hero or the villain to really like what they are. Think about Shang-Chi's dad, right? Think about Wanda Maximoff. Think about the villain from Miss Marvel. Even to, in a sense, think about how they've empowered Loki, and Loki is not like a hero. He's fighting with the TVA to try to figure out what the heck is going on with Kang. So we have this sense of people who are not necessarily bad or good. And then some of the heroes play on that same ideology. Look at Moon Knight. Moon Knight is a very dark guy. Now look at the new revamped, revised version of Stephen Strange. Stephen Strange got the third eye on his head and going into different dimensions with Clea. So this whole ideology, and we were on it on the show, like I said, way before it was announced. When we first heard about some of the titles, I remember I told mine, I was like, bro, we're going to anti-hero. And when he was like, man, do you think? I said, man, I'm telling you, I know. Because that way you build back doors in the characters, which the pendulum can swing from one side to the other. Does that make sense, Max?
Yeah, no, it makes 100% sense. And here's what's you got to factor this in too. Exactly what you said, building off the anti-hero point is when Iron Man came out, his goal was to get loved.
Mm.
When Moon Knight came out, it was going to be polarizing. Like 90% of people were going to like Iron Man.
Mm.
I doubt 90% of people are going to just fall in love with the Moon Knight character because he's dark. He kills people. He's not really good. He's not really bad.
Right.
Khonshu's a jerk. Khonshu was a
Right.
jerk. So these characters aren't really meant to just be beloved immediately. They're
Mm.
polarizing in the way they do stuff. It's like the Punisher. I know he's
Yeah.
very popular, but even in the MCU, like people don't like him. He's like
Right.
he's not really a hero. He's a murderer. And then when you factor in 2 more things, in the Eternals, there was a gay love scene and a sex scene, first in the
Yeah.
MCU's history. There's
Yeah.
already going to be a sect of people that don't like that just because they're closed-minded. And same thing with Miss Marvel, Muslim, all
Yeah.
that stuff. There's a huge group of people based on prejudices that aren't going to like it, and
Right.
it's just going to get trashed. And it's a great show, and it's a great demonstration of culture. And people
Yeah.
are missing
Yeah.
out on that because people. It's like the movie Solo. I heard it sucked. I didn't go see it in theaters. I watched it like
Mm.
3 years later, and I was like, "This movie's awesome." And that's kind of what
Right.
happened. I think
Right.
that's
I
what's
agree.
happened in Phase 4 a little bit.
Yeah. I made a statement for sure and on the show, and I think we've all talked about this in the chat line and had different conversations with different people outside of our spectrum, and with some of the people that we know watch the show on the side, and then they come in and watch it and comment, about it. But definitely for sure that if you have come into it with a bias, you're going to be in a situation to where you diminish the fact of how good the content actually is. And I think in about 2 years or maybe even a year and a half, we're going to look back at some of these beginning big time phase 4 projects and be like, wow, they laid down so much groundwork, especially with the ones that we were introduced to as characters, like you said, Max, Moon Knight, like we said, Miss Marvel, like White Vision, now Falcon being Captain America. Now there's a new Falcon that's coming. Where's Bucky at in this whole story? And I think sometimes people get caught up on the old, which not realizing they're not old. They're just foundational pieces that continue to build the story of not just the Avengers, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
How different is Phase 4 from Phase 2 or 3, would you say?
I think it's groundbreaking. In my own personal opinion, I think Phase 4 is tremendous groundbreaking.
But would you say they're like way different?
Yes, but they have to be, because you know as well as I do, they're selling a product, right? And we know, because we know comic books, we know the lore, we've been following this stuff pretty much from all the time since we were kids, right? That there's so much content that exists with Marvel. It has to be different because they got to bring you new stuff.
Exactly.
So
that was my point.
Some of the tide,
Yeah. No, you made my point for me. I was going to say, if they kept making the same movies, we're going to be like, well, come on, let's get something. Can we get a little change in it? We can't just keep making. You can't make Guardians 1 every movie. You got to change it up, and that's exactly what they've done. And the change came as a shock to a little bit of people, but it's in the long run, it's going to be good. And Maud said it too. Phase 4 is 9 days different than 1 and 2. If it stayed the same, people would be complaining at how nothing new under the sun, another 2-hour Marvel movie.
Right. Well, I mean, think about even some of the lineage of great movies that we've had out there, right? The Terminator series, the Indiana Jones series. By the time you get to the second and third and fourth, people are like, man, I ain't watching that. Unless there's a big, huge gap in the story. And then the next thing that happens is you start shooting holes in the plot line, right?
Well, look at Star Wars.
Think about what's happened with Star Wars.
Exactly. Star Wars is like the trilogies are dead. They're done with it. After episode 9, people were like, we just saw the same thing. 3 more movies. We're done. This sucks.
Right.
And Kevin Feige learned from that.
Right. Marvel has a unique ability not to do that. Marvel can continue to bring you stories and content and loop it all together like a net, because we're always going to get big team up movies. We've speculated on this show that eventually we're going to get Secret Wars. We know eventually we're going to get an Avengers movie. We're thinking pretty much we're going to get maybe a team up movie with the Bads, like the Thunderbolts. We know that eventually they're going to get to something where there's maybe the West Coast Avengers or the Young Avengers. So we know this stuff's going to, with some of the stuff we know that's going to be going on next, we might possibly even get the Cabal. We saw the Illuminati on the big screen. So they're always going to have team ups and tie ups where they got to come together to defeat something or push the story forward. Heck, when you really think about it, that's what just happened with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And Doctor Strange, they brought Wanda and Doctor Strange together to push the story forward. You see what I'm saying? I think that's what people got to look at.
Yeah, and Maud said that we are getting to the evolution of the villain and development of the anti-hero with the depth of the catalog. And for too long, Marvel's had a villain problem. I love Thanos. I love Loki. But you go to the Dark Knight. That is the epitome of what a villain is. A villain is someone who captivated and stole the movie. You can't tell me there's ever been a movie where you thought the villain kind of won. Maybe Black Panther, but again, anti-hero. They don't have an actual bad person. He wasn't bad. You know what I mean? He was just someone who thought differently. It was Malcolm X to MLK.
Right. Killmonger was not a villain per se. Killmonger was just trying to get back to his home. So that storyline is like, is he really bad? So I feel you, bro. But Max, I gotta ask you a question, man.
Okay.
Phase 4, who is the most pivotal character that you think that's not some of the olds, not like Doctor Strange or Thor, that will push the story forward with Phase 4?
So there immediately, I think there's a difference, right? So we've talked
Okay.
about this. We've talked about this offhand. Captain America is great, and but you never saw a Captain America movie that you were like, oh wow, that changed everything. Wow, that brought in this. Like Doctor Strange, Cap versus Captain America. What does Captain America change about the MCU? Okay, Shield's not there. Doctor Strange was here's magic. Here's this huge
Mm,
force, right? So when I think about your
mm,
question, it's not always about the most popular character or the best actor who's going to carry it. Sometimes there's characters that just inherently move the movie along, like the
mm,
addition of Scarlet Witch and her abilities to change it. If she's in a future project, her ability to change the scope of the MCU is greater than Captain America's ever was. So I
mm,
think that person might be the Eternals, even though that movie
mm,
isn't loved. It might be them, or maybe Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings. Maybe that what the
mm.
beacon is going to change everything.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Kamala Khan,
Well,
yeah, she's huge too. She's huge.
yeah, yeah. I think that we've definitely got some characters. I think that the Moon Knight series will be pivotal as we move forward because of what's going on with Blade, Black Knight, Werewolf by Night, maybe Man Thing. There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen with that darker side, which we know eventually we're going to get the Midnight Suns. And I love the
Do
fact
you
of what they're
agree?
going to do.
Do you agree with my point though about that there's some characters that will inherently just move the MCU in greater leaps than others?
Yes, I mean, so let's look at in order to figure it out, or maybe to answer the question. Look, and you did a great job of outlining what happened in phase 1 through 3, right? Captain America, he was the focal point of the center point because he was the guy at the end of the day that was standing and fighting Thanos when it seemed like all was lost, all hell had broke loose. There was nothing that could happen. He was going to stand and fight Thanos to the end, right? So even though Stark was a center point or centerpiece, Captain America was that guy because that's what we saw on the big screen. He fought
Hmm.
Thanos, right?
Yeah.
So I think that I don't. Of course, we know that Benedict Cumberbatch and Chris Hemsworth are pushing the pendulum right now, but I think that Kamala Khan might be, or maybe even the Eternals might be
Well,
one of those characters that push
how
that
about
that,
Ant
that
Man?
pendulum forward.
You don't think
He
Ant Man
could
could
be.
just shift every? That's who I'm saying. I just thought of it like, yeah, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is always going to have the ability to shift the MCU a little bit more because his power is greater than. I love Anthony Mackie and Bucky. There's nothing they can
Yeah.
do in my brain that'll change
Right.
the scope of the
Yeah.
MCU, like the multiverse, unleashing the multiverse. So Doctor
Right.
Strange movie changed a lot more than Thor's did in the grand scheme of the MCU.
Yeah.
That's a fact in my brain. The Eternals. What did we get? We got this huge new group of people. We got the Celestials. We got Thanos' brother.
Yeah.
That all that has the ability, excuse me, just to change everything so much more than maybe what we saw in Thor: Love and Thunder. Maybe we got the new gods, but we already had gods. You know what I mean? We didn't get anything new.
Right. You couldn't even have the Thor: Love and Thunder movie without introducing the Eternals because realizing that there was other things out there like the Celestials, which made an appearance in Thor: Love and Thunder. So
Yeah.
but Max, I was talking about maybe like Kamala Khan or even Moon Knight, but I got one for you. I think that Loki and the addition of Kang are the ones that's going to move the story forward. I think you cannot have phase 4 or phase 5 without Loki and without Jonathan Majors at Kang. And I think they've been holding back and holding back. I think they're the key characters, right? Because what Loki are we actually going to see? Is Loki in Valhalla? Is Loki in hell and this variant just exists? Or is Jonathan Majors? Because I want to point out something because I went back and I watched the season finale of Loki. I watched it again, right? And the conversation that went on between Loki and Kang is epic. I think that if you're a true MCU fan, true Disney Plus fan, true Marvel fan, you need to go back and watch episode 6 of Loki and watch the dialogue that went on between Jonathan Majors and Loki. Because I think it was pivotal of what we're going. He said all kind of stuff, not just to explain like who he is, but to explain actually what's going on, what you see. And so I was like, man, I think they're the guys. And we already know that Jonathan Majors Kang is going to be in Ant-Man Quantumania. So Max, maybe that ties into what you're talking about too, with pushing the envelope forward, you know?
Yeah, I truly think Ant-Man's been one of the most underrated characters and movies, and just his
Mhm.
world-changing ability. Maybe we should come up with like a ranking system or something, but the characters I was talking about, the Eternals, Doctor Strange, Loki that you said, and Ant-Man,
Yeah,
the ability to
yeah,
change the landscape is a lot higher than a lot of other characters.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
And I love that
And
you
Max,
went back and watched that scene, by the way. I love that scene. And I went back too,
mm,
because I was watching Avengers 1. Just like I was like,
mm.
man, I really miss Marvel. I want to watch Avengers 1. Do you remember when Cap says to Tony, "You're not the guy to make the sacrifice, the winning play"?
Yeah, yeah.
Do
That's a
you
great
think
point. Go
that
ahead.
conversation changed the just changed the MCU in general? Just changed Tony Stark. Iron Man and Cap were the linchpins of the last movies to me, says Ahmad, but the Marvels and Intro to Mutants, I believe, will that the Eternals introduce a space element of Marvel. Yeah, that's a big
Mm.
thing that's going to happen in the future. But do you think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
conversation between Iron Man and Cap changed everything in the MCU?
Yeah, I think it did. I think that like how you were saying that those two guys and what we gave a description of how much they were pivotal to that first phase. But I think that because guess what we're seeing now? We even saw it in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Wanda Maximoff says to Stephen Strange, "Well, when you do such and such and such and such, you're deemed a hero. And when I do such and such and such, I'm a villain. Don't seem fair." You know, and so I think that was like same type of moment that happened between Cap and Tony Stark, where
Oh, I
Tony
just
Stark
think
has always been selfish, you know, he's always been
exactly.
selfish, always
Yeah.
about him, you know,
And I'm
and
sorry to interrupt you. Just saying because I don't think Iron Man beats. I don't think they beat Thanos without that conversation. I don't think
yeah,
Tony's willing to make that play.
yeah. Well, the issue was, I really think that the beef between Stark and Rogers was going on even through Endgame. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just really do believe, but they had to come together to be something that was greater than them, right? So they had to buy into the concept. If we don't team up and we don't come back together, because think about when Iron Man first came back in Endgame, right? And he looked at Rogers. He was like, "I can't stand you." And they had that conversation where he was getting the transfusion and all whatever else. He was like, "I hate you." He's not. We're not the Revengers. We're not the Prevengers. We're the Revengers. You know. And next time Thanos and the Big Bad shows up, you take and he ripped the thing off his chest and he handed it to him. He said, "You make sure you put this on and go and hide," because he was so self arrogant, saying that he should have put a shield or a suit around the world, right? So I think that there was still even beef all the way till his death, you know, where he figured out he had to sacrifice himself or for that particular reality in order to push the story forward. If not, there was no way they would beat Thanos,
Yeah, I just
right?
think inherently, like they were built to be at odds. I mean, look at Tony; he's a man of the future, and Cap's the man of the past. You know what I mean?
Right,
Frozen in
right.
ice for 80 years or whatever. Tony was always looking ahead 80 years. Like, how do I do this? How do I do this? But without Cap influencing Tony, like Avengers 1, he makes the play to drop the nuke and almost dies. In Avengers Endgame,
Yeah,
he makes the play to take Thanos' gauntlet and to trick him. And he knew he was
yeah,
going to die when he did it, but he paid the price. That's what heroes
right,
do.
right. And
Excuse
that's
me.
why I think that Jonathan Majors and Kang and Loki is going to push the story. I really, unless it's like, and Max, you might be onto something. It might be that Ant-Man story, but I think that the conflict between Loki and Majors as Kang is going to push it forward naturally, push it forward. Because I
Well,
really, to be honest, I think that's outside of Wakanda Forever. I think that's what everybody's waiting to see.
well,
I think
do you
everybody's
think
waiting to see
there's
Kang.
anything that could happen in Wakanda Forever that would just change the scope? I know Namor and Atlantis is important. I know that's gonna, but if we were gonna rank just the powers that could change the landscape, I feel like the quantum zone's bigger than anything in Wakanda or Atlantis. I feel like
Well,
the unless
well,
I'm wrong, you tell me what you think.
I got a theory. I got a theory. So my theory is not only will you see Doctor Doom, which Mod just said, that Doctor Doom's playing behind it. But I also believe you're going to see the introduction of the Savage Land because that's what it's going to be tied to in some capacity with the Submariner Namor. But I also believe you're going to get adamantium introduced in the MCU. Because think about this. All they got to say is adamantium. And everybody in their mom's going to lose their mind because they're going to be like.
So if they say adamantium, I would assume that would mean Doctor Doom's suit is adamantium. That's like a perfect segue and be like, oh, the suit. I wanted to get the adamantium and vibranium from Wakanda. Or maybe they figure out a process with the vibranium that Dr. Doom can like use it in like what's it called when like they process it and they make it better, like purify it, and now it's adamantium. Yeah. And now it might not have the absorption, but it's even stronger. So they could do something like that. But again, Savage Land, Atlantis, and Namor. What would you call that? Would you just call that the introduction of maybe like what would you call that group of stuff? Just like maybe human evolution or
Yes. But with the introduction of Doom, because Doom, okay, so and I'm gonna try my best not to be biased by Dr. Doom. Because everybody and their mom knows that's my guy, right? Doom is the only guy that uses science and magic together. There was a statement that was made way back when Thor told Jane Foster, in my world, we call it magic. In your world, you call it science, but they're really the same thing. You have to understand that Doom is the guy that uses both of them to the pinnacle of their ability. Dr. Doom is just as much magic as he is science. So the Doom is Tony Stark on the mind and the ability to manipulate technology and all whatever else, and Doctor Strange on the sorcery standpoint. And you merge that together, and that's Victor Von Doom. So if he's introduced in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, oh my goodness,
I think the best way to introduce him would be to be like a puppet master, someone who I don't think we're ready yet for him to just launch in and like be in a movie. I think we need to just let him be kind of like Thanos. You see him behind the scenes in a few times. Maybe they put him at like maybe they're at the next team up movie where he's fighting King. Dr. Doom's just in the background. And you see him in a shot or two. I think that's the key because you have to establish his power as something far beyond what it's going to take just the Fantastic Four.
Yeah. Well, I think even the technologies you saw with Reed Richards, how he came into the Illuminati and you saw that technology, I think that's Doom's technology because we never saw anything like that before, right? We never saw a guy open up a portal and just walk through. It sort of looks like what's going on in Loki, but you're like, wait a minute, who does that? So I think that there's been reference points to Victor Von Doom across the board already. But when he shows up, and even if it's just sprinkled in Wakanda Forever, man, that changes the game. It changes the game.
Is there a villain outside of Dr. Doom that the MCU has yet to introduce that could be another game changer? I immediately think Magneto.
Yes. The only other one that people would love, I think once they figure out and understand who he is Galactus.
Well, I think that's exactly what Eternals was. That was like the first cookie crumb to Galactus was Eternals. Because you saw someone bigger than the planet and you were like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Because we saw Galactus one time in a movie, Fantastic Four 2, The Rise of the Silver Surfer. For those of you who didn't see it, you don't have to go watch it because I wouldn't ask anyone to do that. But he's a hurricane. He's a space hurricane or space tornado. He's a man. He is 1,000,000 feet tall or whatever he is. He's gigantic. He's bigger than the Earth. He eats planets. And if you could find he's obviously just the ideal person for a team up.
Yeah.
Team up movie.
Yeah. I think Earth heroes, space heroes, everybody all together got to come together to knock Galactus out the park. But I think Doom and Galactus are both big time villains to move it.
Yeah, and I think, and Ahmad says, I think he'll be walking around just as a good guy. So basically showing that face beyond the face, because we all know Dr. Doom's a two-face. And I think I agree with the person as Galactus. Yeah. I would love to see an Apocalypse down the road, or maybe.
Oh.
I mean, Oscar Isaac, you don't have to do it again. We'll let that be. I think we can retire Oscar Isaac got the dub in that. Didn't they fight in Egypt in that movie?
Yeah, at the end.
So yeah, Oscar Isaac actually he righted the Egypt mutant ship when he did a Moon Knight.
Yeah. Hey, but I'll tell you somebody as far as the mutant verse that could be a villain that could change the game is Mr. Sinister. Because
Yeah,
we never saw Mr. Sinister introduced and none of the Fox products, maybe a little bit.
I
But
think he's
Mr.
in the
Sinister
cartoon
could,
for a little bit, but yeah,
yeah,
not
he could
enough
change.
for.
Yeah, him and Magneto, depending on what adaptation they do of Magneto, him and Mr. Sinister, oh yeah, that would do it for sure in Phase 4 or
I
Phase
would
4 and
really
Phase 5.
hope with the introductions of mutants, I hope they genuinely are hated from the start. Not by us, but I'm saying the MCU, like the people inside it,
Mm.
dislike mutants because that is such a key to the mutant and Charles Xavier Magneto like basically discussion is how the way they go about solving that hate and turning that hate into love.
So this is my last point that I wanted to make sure that we have in our conversation before we do our closing thoughts.
Okay.
I think they're already setting that up, right? And this is how I think they're setting it up, and I think my theory is right. I think that Kamala Khan introduced as the first mutant was not by accident. She's Muslim. People don't like Muslims, right? I think
Unfortunately.
Monica Rambeau is a mutant too. I think she changed or her powers were activated based on going through the thing that Wanda Maximoff created. And I think now she's a black female. So I think when they start introducing the mutants, the ideology as the mutants are not going to be look like baseline, streamlined, traditional
So you
people.
think it's definitely a choice by Marvel to have
Yes,
an African American female and a Muslim female, a minority within a
yes,
minority.
yes.
That's interesting. I
And
hadn't
I
even thought of that. That makes sense. Yeah.
and I think moving forward, that's how you're going to see the mutants. They're not only going to look different and be different, but there's going to be some differences about them that's introduced in the MCU that already create levels of
I
bias.
mean, Iceman
Because
was
that's
gay
going to
too,
make
right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Warren Worthington, the angel, was a bigot, right? So he was like straight up bigot. So there, I think when they introduce the elements of the X-Men or the mutants, they're going to do something completely different than what we saw in the Fox line, and I think that's how
Let's
they're going
hope
to do it
so.
because the fight of mutants, Charles Xavier and Magneto, was based off of Malcolm X and Dr. King. So I think that that's the element they're going to tie into it. That now they're going to look different, they're going to sound different, but some of their ethnicity and cultural biases are going to be
Hey,
different, and that's
maybe
how they're
maybe
going to tie
Doctor
it in.
Doom, maybe Doctor Doom caused the tragedy and he blamed it on
Mm.
mutants, and that's why they're so hated in the MCU world. Maybe that's something
Could
they could
be.
explore. It's just basically Doctor Doom created some event that turned everyone against mutants, and now we have Charles Xavier, who's basically the knight for doing this peacefully and showing them, hey, we can be good too. And Magneto, who's like, no, we're gonna do it this way, more like Killmonger from Black Panther.
Right. Exact concept. You're on the same street, Max. So I look forward to that because I think it'll bring out a reason why people will start really, really diving into it again because you're going to stand on one side or the other. You're going to be like, if we're inclusion, or no, we want to stay the same, and that's going to drive the conversation and talk
Yeah, or
amongst people
Sean,
that
for
don't.
instance, could be team. I want to do it Magneto's way, and I could be, hey, I want Charles X. I want Professor X's way. Like, let's be peaceful. Let's show them like this, and let's not be radical.
Yep. That's where I think they're going. Right.
I would love
So
that,
Max,
man.
I think it's going to be great, man. So Max, we're coming to the end of the show, man. What you got? Any closing shots or any parting shots or anything you just want to say out to our audience?
I'm gonna tie it in with something me and Ahmad said today. We texted. He's feeling better, so
Yeah.
we said Comic Con. We got an alert today that, there's going to be a lack of Marvel news. And me and him speculated that this is Marvel's way of basically stealing Comic Con from Comic Con with the D22 show that comes out, I think, a month or some odd weeks later. And we said that
Labor
kind of
Day
sucks.
weekend. Labor Day weekend.
Yeah,
in
that kind of
September.
sucks. I think Comic Con is like kind of a storied place where it's kind of just got the air about it. And I think if Disney's really gonna, I don't think we're that critical of Disney on this show and Marvel in general because we genuinely like stuff. And now we have a problem or see something that's acted bad, we didn't love Thor: Love and Thunder, but I think it kind of sucks if Disney's gonna kind of undercut Comic-Con for their own thing. They basically Star Wars Day is basically all the Star Wars updates you get. You're not really getting anything from Comic-Con. I heard maybe Mandalorian season 3 trailer,
Yeah.
but it's kind of already out there for those of you who want to see it. But
Yeah.
I think it's kind of lame by Marvel if they're undercutting Comic-Con.
Yeah, I think it's the unfortunate part, man, and I'm gonna just say this about that comment because I agree is that the it's the nature of the business, and that they want to make it inclusive of them and them only. So it's unfortunate
they control it. You know what I mean? They control the information. They don't make sure there's no leaks. And I mean, Marvel almost got rid of movie theaters. Let's be real. When they did Black Widow on Disney Plus, that got a lot of people in uproar. How cinema's going to stay alive?
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing. We're in the United States. Maybe even across the world. This big box, big branding. So Walmart wants to corner the market. They don't care nothing about it. Nobody else have nothing.
They don't care about Big G's general store and Max's general store.
No. They could care less about them. So that's the issue. Is that Marvel, and I hope that they back off of it a little bit, and maybe that's why they're not. Maybe it's a double-sided store. That's why they're not going to show a whole lot this year, and they'll bring a little bit more at Comic-Con. I mean, at Disney Plus Day
or D23, whatever. Yeah.
But I really do believe that Marvel's doing something that we just can't see it and can't figure it out. Hey, but my parting shots are this. First of all, I want to say, continue to get well by my brother Ahmad Bell. We're missing him at the podcast. We can't wait to get him back on. Maybe
miss is a strong word.
We miss him. Yeah, we miss him. But I really
I'm kidding. We do.
Right, yeah, for sure. I really want and I really hope that we get extensive footage for Black Panther 2. I'm a little bit more excited for that particular project. I'm excited about them all. I just can't sit up here in front like I'm not excited about them.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be the biggest lie ever told on the show.
Exactly. But I'm really excited about that Black Panther 2. So I think between Thursday and Saturday, there's going to be some things put to bed concerning how Black Panther is going to operate in the current MCU Phase 4 that we have. Now, are they going to show us Victor Von Doom? Maybe in a post-credit scene. But I think the additions of Namor and that's going to change the guard. So I'm really, really excited. And for those that don't get an opportunity to view and watch some of the San Diego Comic-Con stuff, on Saturday, we're going to have a little wrap-up show on some of the things that we saw and also preview and talk about some of the post things that we've seen, including trailers and information that dropped at Comic-Con. So before we go, please, once again, like and subscribe our channel. We love sitting around talking to you about Marvelous Talk, about the MCU, about Disney, about Star Wars, about all the different projects that's coming out. So please like and subscribe our channel. We thank you. For me, my boy Max, and my boy Mod, we out of here, y'all. Peace.